And listen, if you're going to come back on Valentine's Day again, I don't want you to wear that tie. I want you to wear a Valentine's Day.
That's right.
Next up, Willow Lane School. I think I explained earlier the school is not going to be here tonight because their engineer couldn't make it and they didn't want to be here without the engineer. But from the township end of things, I'd like to know how things are going. So if you have a plan or something you can put forth, I'd like to see.
Yeah, just to kind of put it in perspective, there's actually two parts of the presentation. It's very important with respect to the first part to understand that the plan that I'm going to be showing you with respect to the improvements proposed on the property by the school, the only purpose of the review is to say what is the procedural requirement for the township to approve the revised land development plan. We have not reviewed the plan. We've done an overview of the plan in terms of what's proposed on it. Again, for the simple purpose of saying that procedurally, how does this plan have to track through the township when it comes in officially?
Now, under land development, if you remember, we did, the commissioners did approve an expedited review process, and this would meet those criteria of coming, and in that case, it would come just directly to this committee and then to the Board of Commissioners for a new plan to be reported. Hi, Brian.
So, the best way to characterize everything that's happening on the property is circulation changes or revisions. They are changing the circulation of traffic and pedestrians on the property to accommodate the proposal to have the children walk to school. Looking specifically at the changes, over here, for those that are familiar with it, there is a crossing of this driveway which is being eliminated by moving the pathway to the south and then putting a small retaining wall in there. So you'll see a note that there's a retaining wall and then the pathway then shifts, which allows the pathway to remain on the same side of the road. And therefore you would not have to cross the driveway to get into the property. In this area right here,
Bill, I think that what I heard, I got something from Superintendent Seidenberger today, because he said they weren't going to be here, but he wanted to make it clear that regardless of whether this is a walking school or not, they still think these improvements are a good idea.
Yeah.
Just because of the circulation they're seeing.
Now, these proposals
So
are
just to be clear,
the proposals that are being
regardless.
shown are at their cost?
yes.
Even though they're on our property? Yes. This is our
Yeah,
property.
everything that's on this plan is being done at the cost of the school district.
This is the school, this is the fire station.
Okay.
So there's inner easements. Dual easements for access here, and obviously the same for us to use their access point.
To answer your question, all these improvements are being paid for by the school district,
Okay.
if and when they go in.
Okay.
Refresh my memory. I drove up there. This is a basin here, and I saw that there was an emergency spillway that flowed over. It wasn't flowing, but spillway went down over here. And I guess
See, there was a reason why the sidewalk went the way it did. You're actually
Yes, I had the same question.
Sure, but
Have you seen it, Ron? Have you seen it?
it puts a mid-block crossing, I call it mid-block crossing, which is never a good idea. And so that maybe should have run up all the way up there at the original plan, which is there's no excuse for, good planning,
Oh, gosh.
But anyway, what's going to happen to the water there? Is that still going to?
The water would run across that pathway, but ironically, over in this area, there's now an area of water ponds on the pathway, but so for 99% or more of the time, it's an improvement because the water will no longer pond there. It's going to move the pathway over. Yes, if the pond overflows, it will flow across the pathway, but those are very, very, very rare instances.
We anticipate that at a hurricane event.
Yes, so you're talking about something that's very infrequent.
Kids will probably not be walking to school.
More,
in that
more
situation.
very, very
Well, there's
unlikely.
also fencing
I just
around.
Well, but the water.
The water, he's talking about the overflow, which is going to
Oh,
go across
I
the
see.
pathway.
Yeah.
in terms of process, they're going to be bringing this to the next meeting. They haven't finalized this plan. This is just what we've
Right.
seen preliminarily,
Sure.
and they haven't gotten authority from their board to proceed one way or the other. But what I think what they said was they think this is a good idea,
Yeah.
regardless going forward, whatever happens.
They're going to present this at one of our commissioners' meetings?
Well, it'll be at the planning committee.
Planning and zoning
next.
committee next month.
They were going to do it this time, but they
Just a-
couldn't.
Eventually it will come before us.
And then
So
it'll-
we'll come to the full board.
And to be honest with you, Doug, going back to your question there, that's why we're not discussing the specifics of it, because the school district's not here to speak to it. We're
Right.
talking- I'm just identifying what they're doing, so you have those changes there. They're going to add drop-offs here for the cars, 29 new car drop-offs, which is going to involve signage, removal of striping, adding striping. They're going to put new bus drop-off areas here, also the addition of signage, removal of striping, adding of striping where necessary, and then they're providing a paving addition here to allow room for the buses to turn around here.
And the main reason that, the main theory behind this plan is because of the lack of queuing capacity for the parent drop-off. By taking them around the back and extending the path distance, that you're increasing the queue
Well,
line.
that was my next question. When a parent comes to drop off a child, what's the?
Well, Jim,
Come
that's
in
probably,
this way,
I would
or they come
discuss,
this way?
I would discuss that when they're here.
Oh,
We're just,
okay.
yeah, what I'm trying to stay away from is specifics of how it operates.
I agree.
We don't have
Yeah, because
it.
you're almost presenting on their behalf.
Yeah, I'm not presenting this
No,
plan, I'm saying,
I just thought you knew.
Make sure this bill
goes to them.
I think we wanted to look at the extent of
It's
the.
our understanding's going around.
So we know what process
Yeah,
to follow.
and the
That's
reason I
really
ask is every
focused.
plan that they've ever brought before us for the last 3 schools, we've had problems.
and I recognize that, and
With
when,
the elementary school, and this is critical, and architects don't seem to get it.
yeah, now, when this plan comes in officially and we review it as opposed to the overview we did, we'll be raising those issues and we have the opportunity to discuss them. So, and then, as I said, the final change is the slight paving in here to allow for the buses to turn around. We've overviewed the plan, looked at these changes or improvements, and it's our recommendation, and I believe Sarah agrees with us, that it could be done through an administrative review, which would then go to the Board of Commissioners following a committee review, but not go to the Planning Commission, because there's no planning issues in the sense that the Planning Commission would have to formally review it, so it'd be an administrative review to the commissioners. Certainly, as a courtesy, the Planning Commission could be kept in the loop as to what's going on. So that's the recommendation, which
And we did look at the
it's
conditional.
really the
use
issue at
permit.
hand.
We did look at the conditional use permit, Jim, because I know that was, there really isn't anything in there that would require them to go back through that process. And I had Peter take a pretty close look at it to make sure, so that we could lay it out for them, because their timing, I guess, could be critical.
Well, it's,
So you're talking about, so the administrative review is going to allow for an expedited
Yeah,
process?
it would be a
Still be
review
an
by
engineering
staff,
review.
Right.
by us.
Allowing us to maybe meet the
I don't have a
goal
problem with that.
for the opening.
I don't have a problem with that, but I still believe that they should rehear the conditional use. And that's done at the same time normally as the plan comes before the Board of Commissioners anyway, so there's no additional step that's needed.
Mhm.
But the important thing with the conditional use that I've always been understood is that the township can ask for something reasonable beyond the ordinance with a conditional use hearing. That's the importance of that hearing. And in this case, there may be additional signage, there may be additional costs that I feel the school district should incur and not the township. And that would be the vehicle to require that. So I'm still of the opinion that they should have the conditional use hearing at the same time before the VOC.
Yeah, from our perspective, I know Sarah talked to the solicitor's office about that. That's not really an engineering issue, it's probably more a legal or
It's a procedural,
issue.
you're absolutely
So you
right.
have to pursue that.
And I think there's some flexibility. I mean, there's no hard and fast line like there is for what a variance is, about what, when the conditional use is required.
Well,
If you're amending a use.
It's a use that's a conditional use. This is a serious issue with the neighbors, with the township. This isn't a little thing.
Would that-
And this gives everybody the proper opportunity to ask questions, to, cross-examine people, that type of stuff. I just think that the step, which is no additional time to the school district, there's no additional step needed.
So what you're saying is when it goes through staff, comes into the board for its final approval, is that night we would have the final approval, but we would also have a conditional use hearing.
correct.
Wherein,
And most conditional uses, that's the way we do it anyway.
yeah, but I guess the problem with that procedure is when it comes in front of us, they're expecting a final approval. A conditional use hearing would say, well, we want you to put in additional signage or.
That should be a condition of the approval. That's been done in the past. That's no problem.
I think that something could be vetted through this committee too, so that you wouldn't be surprising them at a hearing. But I think that if that's the way that the committee wants to recommend it, if the process go.
Well, again, we had I think we'll discuss this more at the next meeting, but we had our solicitor take a look at it. His viewpoint was it did not have to have a conditional.
Did not have to.
It did not
Didn't
have to.
have to, but
Right.
he didn't say that we couldn't.
I'm not sure what, I just know that he stated it did not have to be a conditional use. You're right, Jim, I think the question was, I think your question was, does this have to be a conditional use hearing?
Right.
I
Well, I wanna make
think you,
sure
or someone asked that
Do
question.
we have the
Or
flexibility?
should it be? You know, my point is that this is a revision to a previously approved conditional use, that's all.
Well, you know what, Jim, we'll look at it and come back with a recommendation, or from staff anyway, with.
Right, when our March meeting, we can have this all.
I don't want to pounce on them.
No, I'm not
Till
trying to
then.
pounce on them, I'm trying to give us as much option as we may need later on.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Because without the conditional use, it's going to be by the book.
Sure.
If it's not in the book, we can't ask for it. With the conditional use, that gives us a little bit of flexibility, that's all.
Okay.
Okay.
Two concerns in that regard, and however it comes out, I have no feeling either way in terms of what happens, but procedurally, if it does require conditional use, the sooner they know that, the better, because when they make the application, they have to include an actual conditional use application. The second thing is, the ordinance requires a recommendation from the planning commission, so the solicitor has to look at whether it now requires to go to the planning commission.
That's why I brought it up at the last
Yeah.
meeting, to give them, you know,
So
I didn't
timing
bring this up
becomes-
at the last minute.
Yeah.
And I didn't want them to say, geez, we didn't know,
Yeah.
you know.
So I think the sooner that's resolved, the better, because we're on a very
The other thing
The whole thing's on a very tight
you might
schedule.
want to look at this grading in here. Now, they received the variance originally because this was in a 100-year floodplain.
Mhm.
Floodplain comes right up to this line.
Right.
So I don't know if this additional grading in here is going to trigger anything. or
That's
else
something
it might
we
look
have to
at
look
it.
As I said, we didn't review the plan.
Right, no, I think here, I'm just giving you what
Yeah,
I'm
good
saying,
point.
you know, just to give them a heads up.
Those soccer fields weren't on the original approved plan either. I thought that was all going in
No, the fields
No,
were,
really?
yeah.
Yeah, they were on.
They always were, in
Okay.
fact, they have an underground piping. for the-
Right.
That's where the sprayer
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
That's where it's going to go, so.
And you won't see anything in the near future, because that's an open issue right now between the contractor and the school district as to the completion of all that, so that's all separate
That's
issues.
all
It's
about
gonna-
intention,
Yeah,
I
yeah, it's
see.
still
No,
an issue.
and I think from a planning point of view, procedure, you know, the changes that I've heard talked about make a lot of sense. I mean, even if it's a walking school or it's not a walking school, I think providing accessibility is a good idea regardless, if people use the facilities all the time. And
Oh, no doubt.
so we'll look into the process then and make sure that, I mean, that was the main thing I wanted to get in front of you guys today, was really a roadmap for how they go forward, because as Bill said, you know, if they are making changes that we want to have before the school starts, they've got to really get going.
Especially for the fire department, you know, if the queuing is going to occur, you know, if this is going to be a walking school, and it turns out that 90% of the parents drive their children anyway, which I feel is a very good chance of that happening, you know, this queuing could occur all the way down through the driveway, which then will block off access to our fire department.
No, I agree.
Now, we've talked to them about that, Jim, and that'll be presented in March, but the fire department has been in our meetings we've had with the school.
I think, if I understood them correctly, I think the cars are coming in this driveway and the queue in this direction, the buses are coming in there, so you have
Correct.
complete separation.
That's
So
right.
that's a gate there and a gate there, so that,
Yeah, that's very obvious by the layout. yeah.
so, you don't, I see they're removing bus parking spaces here. Are we changing, are they changing, do you know, are they changing the number of permanent parking spaces that are out there?
Judging by the plan, it would appear that way, because it doesn't note that, but again,
No, it
we haven't
doesn't.
actually.
I think Carl will have to review the parking
Right.
issue,
Right.
make sure that that's what's
Absolutely.
applied.
That would be all part of the formal review when the plan
I
actually.
believe part of the
comes out.
conditions of the conditional use, I believe, is where the drop-off situations arose. You might want to check that.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that they're complying with the number of children that are, I think that's based on the number of children at the school.
So buses are going to be the only things that are allowed to come in through sauerkraut?
That's what they're initially,
That's
until
what
we.
they told me.
I don't
We don't know.
I
No,
get it,
that's-
this is all very preliminary.
That's the
conceptually
circulation
what's
separate.
happening.
You have the
That's why we
buses
kept it on the
here,
agenda.
and you have the
Right.
vehicles
Talk about
over
the
here, so
process
they're
and-
totally separated from each other. That's the major circulation
And
change.
and issues.
But the issue with the parking lot is, I'll just say, having gone through the process, or at least my wife having gone through the process, when you drop your kids off in the morning, it's a quick drop off. You park your car, the kid runs into school, shoes, you see they're safe to leave. But when you're picking them up in the afternoon, and you have to work this out with the school, is that the car, you have to park, you have to get out, you have to go into the building and sign your child out, because that's how they did it at West Cliffsville. So if that's the case, and they're increasing the number of cars, they have to have parking out here for everybody when it closes at that time. And next month time for that, but that's why if you're eliminating parking, and that's going to be a procedure, then parking standards have to be looked at that carefully.
Yeah, I believe today, the way it's currently set up, those drop-off spaces and pickup spaces, so to speak, are out here.
They are.
They're along the curb line, but, yeah, what's proposed will be discussed next month.
But that's going to be removed now?
I don't know yet.
I'm going to suggest we wait till the school district reps are here.
Yeah.
We're delving into issues that I don't know that we know the answers, and I don't want to speculate and mislead somebody. Yeah.
Comes up. So, all right, in regards to township issues, that we have to put signs in.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
the
but
second part, this is just the first part.
Alan has said
Right.
this was just a procedural
Right, just to
question.
let you know that we're working with the school, and they'll be here in March.
On this one, we'll do,
Here's planning, so again, with this one, this is not a final plan or any, so this is not a final plan here, it's a work in progress, but basically, pictorially, here's the school, and we're zooming out. The cyan line is what we understand to be the limit of the 1.5 mile radius that they have proposed.
If you could just hold up a second. Anybody that wants to see these plans, welcome to sit
Yeah.
up here at the front table. We can put 3 or 4 chairs up here so you can all hear the discussion. This is just going to be the discussion about how the township is moving forward with improvements which we may have to do. This is the first plan, it's the first time I'm seeing this plan. And so Alan's going to give us a description of what is out there and what it looks like we're going to have.
We'll call it more of a status update.
Okay, status update.
Randy, you have to stand.
Yeah, that's right. Members of the press.
Yeah, in fact, you can go in the other room. We'll let you know when.
No press.
This mile and a half is now within the zone of the children that go to that school. It's not a 1.5 mile radius.
well, they decided a 1.5 mile radius, but then identified specific subdivisions.
Yeah, these
So
are-
in some cases,
Okay.
it's not going to be more, but it'd be
So
less.
this is their
This
designation,
is
to the
our-
best of your knowledge.
yes.
Okay.
They had there was a listing that was, that said the different names of the subdivisions. So basically, as you see, some of those go further than what they do on this side.
Right.
We understand there might have been other factors that played into that. But having said that, given the assumption of the cyan line, the cyan arrows basically are indications of where the pedestrians may travel along the routes to get to the school. So the first, there's maybe 4 or 5 different types of improvements that are potentially anticipated. The first one would be the installation of 2 school zones with flashing amber lights with the reduced speed limit during those times. So one would be on Willow Lane, and it would start just on the other side of the 4-way stop condition, and also encompass the Wheatland Drive intersection up here. So it would encompass this area. And the signals are designated by these yellow lights with a sign. The other one would be proposed for Mill Creek Road over on this side, which again would stop just outside of the intersection here that's always stop control, and come this direction over here. So it encompasses this frontage of the school, and most importantly, the driveway, where people that were walking on this side would be coming in, and that's along that driveway we're talking about with the walkway. So that's the first type of improvement. Excuse me. Yeah, the maximum distance required or permitted by law, I believe, is 1,600 feet. So some people may think that they want to make this as long as possible, but then you also have to remember how aggravatingly slow you have to drive through here.
And that is a 15-mile-an-hour
Yes.
speed, right?
Yes, and people tend to ignore it if you overpopulate with signs or overpopulate with artificially low speed limits. So we try to concentrate in the areas that would be the most important to the pedestrians, and that's the way that the Pennsylvania code is set up.
This is also the township line right here. It's just sort of Macungie, that's correct.
Let's see, so that's one type of improvement that we looked at. Another one was where and again, this isn't the final plan, but we also were looking at, is there any ramps, any ADA ramps, any walking areas that might need some attention? And we've identified 3 in our field visit. 2 of them will be brand new. Two of them will be brand new ramps, and a third one would be one that would be reconstructed. And they are not shown specifically on here yet, but I believe one of them to be reconstructed is either this one or this one. And the 2 additional ones, I believe there was one over on this side of the development and one over on this side. So we're looking at about 3 of those. We also looked at, again, where the pedestrians would travel to get to the school. We looked at where the existing stop signs are in relation to where the existing ramps are, the curb cuts are. And it's our suggestion that, or our belief that we're going to try to have the crossing take place where there's a stop sign to protect them, so that the vehicle must stop, as opposed to having a mid-block crossing or, or even a crossing at an intersection without the stop sign.
Yeah, this is the only exception, Doug, because that driveway, that is a mid-block.
But it comes out of the driveway,
Yeah.
so there is an intersection.
It's private driveway.
And
So at Wheatland, they would have to walk down to the intersection of Sauerkraut and Willow?
Wheatland. No, you'd be able to go across
You could cross it?
here. This is, I have to take that back and say that, there's some talk about potentially maybe a crossing guard at a couple of these places. So what would override that rule that I just said would be as if there was a crossing guard there, and that would apply to this location.
I'm sure they probably are looking at here and probably here also, all the main drags.
Yeah,
Those Gs,
it's the Gs with the
Oh,
circle,
okay.
although this one G we were recommending to put over here, so imagine that's over here.
Thanks.
Now, having said that, what to do with the different crosswalks, we're currently proposing, 2 different types of treatments. One would be within the residential areas that have a lower vehicular volume, probably a lower pedestrian volume, very deep in the development, of just painting or doing thermoplastic of 2 lines for the crosswalk, and having something a little bit more outstanding on the main roads of Willow, Sauerkraut, and Mill Creek along the lines of the textured surface that's colored, that's currently in place a couple places along Sauerkraut over in this area. One step further, talking about where protected by stop signs, these orange circles over here are intersections. There's 4 intersections here where our rule fell apart, where the pedestrians need to be crossing in this direction in order to get over to the school property. However, the stop signs are in the opposite direction. So we would propose to potentially look at those for traffic volumes of whether, they could be warranted for additional stop signs.
4-way stop.
An always stop. And if not, then potentially, like this one may be problematic because it's only a T and it may be difficult to meet that warrant. We have to look at the warrants a little bit further, but then we would obviously have to sign the crosswalk a little bit better. But our goal is to try to make sure that there's always a stop sign in front of the crosswalk. Looking at, and there's a couple of different, updating the school or the always stops to the always stop plaques as opposed to the 4-way or none that are potentially out there. And the end of the school zone signs, which are, which would terminate the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. So
where would the end of the school zone go?
the opposite of.
Opposite of.
Yeah, so this is the zone, so this is the start. He can't see this light or anything, so there will be a sign here saying end of school zone and vice versa. It needs to be consistent across both directions of travel.
Are all these roads dedicated to the township?
Yes.
They are? Okay.
Yeah, and they all have the wearing course applied and everything, so, because we looked at that also when we were doing the site inspection of, would we be applying some pavement markings to crosswalks that, would be overlaid by a wearing course in the near term, and we didn't didn't see any cases where that would be the
My
case.
main concern is that they have not been dedicated yet, that really can do anything at all, because they've been technically private streets yet. That's where my question is coming from.
Right.
And I assume that all the road frontages have sidewalks, or is there any areas within the area where sidewalks would have to be placed?
In fact, going back to the original discussion about this 1.5-mile radius, part of the decision as to which ones would be walking and not walking had to do with the prevalence and or absence of sidewalk. But this is extensive sidewalk system through here, so it really
I was
really
concerned
fits
about
nicely.
forcing homeowners to install sidewalk
No,
because
no.
of this project. That's
No,
my
it actually works
concern.
out really well because it has a sidewalk all over it.
And that was one of my concerns too, before we went out and actually did the field view of, how many sections of sidewalk are missing or how many, ramps are, but it's all relatively newer, and they have the sidewalks in place, and like Bill said, that was one of the criteria I think that was used. So those are the main elements. We're still piecing it together, but between the ARLE grant money to do some of the crosswalks over here and what's in the budget, we're hopeful to get pretty close to.
See, this is actually another point of why I feel strongly about the conditional use hearing being held, because had this school been presented in this fashion to us originally, which it was not, this would have all been part of the conditional use hearing, the walkability, the signage required, all that would have been part of the conditional use, and that's why I think it should be brought up now. It should all be part of the approval. I'm sorry.
So that's, I just wanted to take this time, give you a kind of a status update and show you the different types of improvements that we're looking at.
All right.
This is important.
Here's something I'd like to see, and it's outside the scope of all this work. I figure if we're fixing intersections, if we're doing stuff for the walkability of the community, I mentioned it to
Sauerkraut and
my manager, and I asked
I went out
him,
and looked at it today.
and today the ponding is gone, but
No, it's still there.
it was down at this intersection right here. The water, even though we don't have people walking down this side of the street, on the east side of the road, water comes down that side, and the curbing, I think, ends, and the water continues down to a low point, where it then is supposed to flow overland across the walkway there and into a sump over here, was picked up by a pipe and probably goes into that basin over there. But the grass grows, it's not constructed right, whatever, the water is ponding out into that street there. Even a car coming down, even though it stops, maybe zip through and splash somebody's in. Water ponding onto the street, in winter months, is never a good
Doug,
thing.
I think both, that's on Willow, which is PennDOT. Yeah.
Which is, but if we're going in for any sort of.
Right, well, I think, Al, we want you to take a look at that.
At least take a look.
Because
at
this is scheduled, this was a small detention pond for this
Oh, was it?
subdivision. Yeah, and what happens, Doug, is this does not drain over into here.
Oh,
There's
okay.
this detention pond here, there's an extensive storm drainage system at like 0.5% grade that runs all the way down
Down.
Sauerkraut and then hooks in over here into the creek.
So for the.
So we might be able to, if there is a real quick fix, you might just be able to take an inlet and put it right in that fire.
Yeah, for the sake of not putting an inlet in earlier, there probably should have been one there, but they ended the curve and the grass grows high and no systems hardly ever work. We'll look at it now.
We'll look at that in conjunction with that, upgrading that crosswalk.
Getting back to the warning lights, Bill, what kind of time frame do you need to make sure those get in prior to the,
We
Make sure that gets in a minute.
That's it, right?
We're really looking, we're working on the signal permit plans now.
Okay, good.
For both of those zones, and we would like to turn those into PennDOT in the next week. We can.
okay, great, just so we're making progress.
So the other part of that is the idea of going with solar, because now it
Yes.
eliminates the timeline that you may be dealing with the PBL for
Okay.
seconds.
I'd like some kind of commitment from the school district, though. I'd hate to be spending all kind of money, and then they change their mind about busing.
Yeah,
They've been battling
But we
us back and
gotta,
forth
we gotta
about
keep
this. I know.
moving, we put this in the budget to put these warning lights on. So we gotta keep going, if we wait and wait,
It'd be nice to have a letter from the school district just indicating that they're gonna move forward with this, that they're not gonna bust the children. That's all we need to know.
We want to do this anyway?
I think we have to do it anyway, though, Jim, I think we want, I mean,
I don't, We don't need to
The
spend this kind
parents
of
want
money
it, I
if
can
we
tell you
don't.
that.
Well,
Parents want it.
they may want it, but, you know,
Well,
the other
here's what we're gonna
elementary
do,
schools
Jim.
don't have it
I'd like you to-
that are brand new, you know.
You present this next week at the board meeting, because we have to move forward. You guys tell us what to do.
All right.
At this point, we have it in the budget to do,
I'm
but I
just bringing it
well,
up.
don't bring it to me. You have to bring it to your board members, I think.
Yeah.
And if you tell me no, then we,
I
then
mean,
you,
if something has to be done because they're doing it, I have no problem with that. But I hate to be spending money if we don't have to, and then because they're changing their mind one way or the other.
I just want to say, I mean, we got into this last
Yeah,
meeting.
I don't-
but, you know,
yeah.
But I'll just tell you, I mean, the parents are, I know, you know, we've got to follow the procedures, but the parents are very, very concerned about this. And it's not just 5 parents or 6 parents, it's the entire 1.5 mile radius that are actively watching this and they want improvements. So, you know, we budgeted for it, from my standpoint. There really is no reason not to move forward with doing it, regardless of the outcome of what the school decides to do.
Jim, why do we have, this is a question I
I'm
don't know.
sorry, I'm chiming in on your committee meeting,
We
so I
have a-
apologize.
We
Again,
have-
the cost of these would have been done at a conditional use.
You're right, but that's behind us.
Originally.
Why do we have
Originally.
lights on
Right.
Brookside for the school there? Because that's not a walking school.
The question, I
I
thought
don't
about
know why
that,
we had
Sarah.
someplace another not.
They have been there so long.
Yeah.
If you look around at the various schools, and I've been kind of watching as I
Yeah.
drive around, there really is no pattern, but my suspicion is that the expectation was there'd be a lot of walking of kids along Brookside Road, so they put them in to slow the traffic down. But that was 40, 50 years ago. I mean, why was it done back then? I wouldn't want to even speculate.
See, the brand new school at Parkland, the new elementary, the Jandal new elementary school, there's no signage. There's no
It doesn't make it
lights
right,
on.
though.
No, I'm not saying it makes it right or wrong, I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
I-
it-
Well,
you
here's
can't
what
look at
we're
another-
gonna do. Bill, don't do anything until Thursday's meeting, at which time, under your report, you tell us, we work for you. You tell us what you guys want
Yeah,
to
if the
do.
board wants to move forward.
Well, just in terms of the issue of going forward, the critical point, quite frankly, is going to be when it's time to advertise for bids for construction.
Right.
I mean, we can continue to go forward if the committee's comfortable with that and get the necessary permits and approvals, and there's a certain cost involved in that. The significant cost is once you advertise and begin to enter into a contract with
Right.
contractors, because that's what the major cost is. So we'll keep ahead of that in terms of giving you an idea when that's coming so that you're sure to make that decision in time. But that, I think, is the critical point, which it has to be go or no go.
So what, in terms of a timeframe, an action by the board, what do you need from us to get this moving forward so
Well-
that when we run into the contractor issue, things get done?
At this point in time, Ryan, we are moving full speed ahead because we've informed everybody, and I've sent an email to Bruce to say we're moving full speed ahead until somebody says otherwise.
That means that
because
you're
we-
pursuing this
We're
plan
pursuing to
right
get
now.
this plan, to get all
As
the
if it's
permits with
done.
all the necessary approvals. The cost-sharing issue can be a separate issue, but in order to meet that deadline of August, we can't sit back and wait, so we're moving full speed ahead. My only point is that if there's a concern with the expenditure, it's critical at the point you advertise for bids and begin to get into that phase of it, because now you get the bids in, theoretically, if you get them, you're going to award a contract. Once you award a contract, then it starts to move pretty
You mean the
quickly.
expenditures, the concern about expenditures in terms of who's going to pay for it with us or the school?
More from the standpoint you've incurred the obligation. Once you award the contract, the obligation to pay for it and build it is there. But
So if we have it in our budget, doesn't it alleviate that concern?
from the standpoint that the
Budgeted
money's
for it.
available, yeah, that's a policy
The money's
decision, but
there.
the money's already there, yeah.
Whether you spend the money.
That's right.
Well, that's up to you guys. Next, you let us know.
So, yes, that's fine.
Yeah.
And as Alan said, just to emphasize again, we can't say for sure, but we're hopeful we can stay within that combination of the 85,000 in the budget plus the ARLE monies that are available, which I think comes to about 100,000. The good news in this is that there were very few handicap ramps that had to be done because they're very expensive. So again, we're moving full speed ahead. We don't need any authorization at this point, but when it comes time to advertise for bids, it'll be the next critical step to say we're asking for permission to advertise for bids to proceed to construction on the project.
I would hope by the time they come next month to this committee that you'd have an idea, you know, they
We
would
might
have
have
a
a
clear
better
idea of
idea.
the direction they're going, so.
And we'd have a better
Hopefully.
idea of the schedule at that point too,
Yeah.
because we're still kind of scrambling based on this relatively short notice to get moving
We
on.
have to be careful too with the handicap ramps, if that's along private roads, or I mean, on public roads. That normally is the responsibility of the homeowner, curb and sidewalk. So we're also setting precedent in the future for that too, you know, if we pay for it, you know.
Now, you said they're very expensive. Is that the design that's expensive, the permitting?
It's a little bit each, but they're about $5,000 a piece, I think, 4 or 5 a piece.
We figured, you know, some might be more, some might be less, but we figured, you know, $4,500 a ramp pretty much for,
To build it.
to build it.
Build it, okay.
To build it, but some places you might have to, you know, work out existing curb, build the curb, you know, regrade.
I will say they're, on the engineering side, they're a lot less expensive than on the state roads. Alan's going to attest to that, because the paperwork you have to fill out in order to justify them, so to speak, is
All right.
it's just unbelievable.
The other handicap ramps that are in are more or less ADA compliant.
They're not the latest standard, but they're
With the standard that was at the
for the standard that was at the time, you know, they're very traversable. There's, you know, you don't have a big pothole in them, and they're not, you know, offset by 3 inches, and, you know, they,
Okay.
There was a grandfather.
Yeah, the judgment calls are acceptable, but if you looked at it and said, does it meet current standards, I think in a lot of cases it would be no, because many of these don't have the tackle surface.
but on the other hand, it's typically triggered by, you know, if you're going to do anything with the, you know, major roadway work, then that's when that would be brought in at that time. At this point in time, you know, we're basically not looking to do anything with the roadways. It's trying to identify, clearly mark and sign the pathways and make sure that there's adequate crossing behind the stop sign, unless there's a crossing guard.
Is this in a form that we could put this on our website? And
I
maybe put a list together of what you've described today?
Probably
I
take a
would-
little
I
more
think it's-
time.
I would prefer to wait a couple of weeks.
Premature for that, I think, in case there's some changes or whatever.
Yeah, I brought this today just to kind of show you, you know, like those orange circles and stuff, we're going to say we're going to, you know, resolve those issues. And then in a couple of weeks, probably in around a couple of weeks, then I feel we'd be at a point where we could, you know, give something to you that we could have that, what you're requesting.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Very much. When's the next meeting with the school district?
There isn't one. Planning and zoning committee.
Planning and zoning committee, next month. And listen, if you're going to come back on Valentine's